We're in the middle of lockdown, the hairdressers have been closed for weeks, and your barnet is turning into a bird's nest. What do? Bite the bullet and cut it yourself? Well, this video attempts to show you how to do just that. Now, this self-haircut is for curly or wavy hair, and I recommend you do it on dry hair so that you can see exactly how much you're taking off without the dreaded bounce that comes after the haircut. You can get a bit of a shock. The thing I like about the haircut is it takes all the straggly ends off, and also the layers blend really nicely into the length. And for me, I found that my recently adopted curly girl regime really comes into its own now that I've chopped off all of those loose dry ends. Before you go searching the house for any old pair of blunt scissors that you've got lying around, stop and invest in a decent pair. And when I say invest, you only have to spend about £15. I got these on Amazon, and I'll put a link in the description below the video to where you can get them. As I said, about 15 quid, and I think it's definitely worth it because if you use blunt or unsuitable scissors, you could actually end up damaging your hair and making it look worse than when you began. And this is how I began: long, previously layered hair that now wouldn't hold a wave or a style. And this is my hair after the haircut. Layers are back in and all the dry ends are gone. So here goes. Grab a towel, a mirror and something to cover the floor with and get chopping. We're going to start by trimming the lengths of your hair. So bring all of your hair around to the front of your face, part it in the middle and make sure that there's an equal amount of hair on each shoulder. Take one side and pull it down as straight as you can, and then put your fingers where you think you'd like to trim the hair, and then give it a bit of a bounce because this will show how far up your hair might bounce once it's been cut. Next, well, trim the hair. I was able to do it mostly with my hands in this position, and then when I got to the very end of the piece of hair that I wanted to cut and couldn't trim it in this position, I flipped my hand back so that the hair was upside down, a little bit like how the hairdressers do it, and carried on trimming until I got that whole piece trimmed off. Don't worry if you think that it's uneven because we can tidy it up a little bit later. Next, you need to do the same on the other side. So grab the hair that's on the other shoulder, pull it down as straight as you can, giving it a bit of a bounce, again like we did the first time, to check how far up your hair waves or curls up once it's been trimmed. And then grab the scissors and do the same. Cut off however much you want to trim. And as you can see with this side, I flipped my hand back again like I did the first time in order to get that very last little bit. And again, like I said with the other side, don't worry too much if it's not completely straight, because in a minute we're going to check and tidy up any bits that are hanging down longer. Phew, that's the scariest bit done. So now we're going to check our handiwork. So bring all your hair forward again, start to check the lengths. As you can see, I'm pulling the layers around and tossing my hair onto one and the other side to make sure that there aren't any bits that are hanging down longer. And in fact, on my hair, there certainly were bits hanging down longer. You can see there on my right hand side that I've got a bit of a long strand, which I then went in on again with the scissors and trimmed it off in the same way that I did the first time round, to even that up. And you can do that throughout the hair for those lengths if there are any bits that are uneven. And I would say if this is your first go, then don't be afraid to just keep checking and checking again. It doesn't really matter how long this stage takes. As you can see there, I was combing it through and brushing it through and sort of messing around with it to make sure that I didn't miss any bits, and actually did go in on it again on that same side to trim a longer piece that was hanging down a bit lower than the rest. So yeah, keep going on that bit until you're happy, and then we'll move on to the next stage. Once you're happy that you haven't missed any lengths, bring all the hair forward again and make sure it's parted equally in the middle, because now we're going to soften up any blunt lines that you made while trimming the lengths. So bring one side round again like we did on the first stage and pull it as straight as you can. And bring your hands down, or your fingers down I should say, down to where you'd like the ends to be cut. And now instead of cutting a straight line across the ends as we did in the beginning, cut into the hair. Now you may have seen your hairdresser doing this, and it kind of does make you feel a little bit professional, but it is actually necessary because it softens the ends and gives a bit of a natural line at the bottom of your length there. So just cut straight upwards into the hair, as you can see me doing there. It might be a little bit tricky at first. I think I probably did find it a bit tricky, but you do get the hang of it, and it just helps to soften up those ends. If you've got quite thick hair like I have, or a lot of hair, then this might take a while, and don't be afraid to just keep going over it. Checking, of course, each time you do it in the mirror to make sure that you're not going too far, because what this method also does is lightens up the hair as well. It removes the bulk from the bottom of your hair, so you don't want to go too light and make it too thin. As you do this with your hair, you'll notice that the ends will thin out, and just keep going basically until you're happy that the blunt edge that you cut originally into their hair has now gone, and that the ends are nice and light and not too heavy. And then switch to the other side. As you can see here, I'm pulling the hair as straight and as brushed out through my fingers as I can to make sure that I've got all of the lengths the same length basically, and then do the same as you did with the other side. So cut up into the hair, lightening and reducing that bulk and thinning out those ends. And it also helps to even out any little mistakes that you had as well, which is always a good thing. Check your hair again in the mirror. As you can see there, I'm pulling it down as the hairdressers do to make sure that the lengths are equal each side. And already I think you can see an improvement. So now that you've trimmed the lengths of your hair, we're now going to move on to the layers. So before we do that, you need to brush out your hair. You can use a brush to do that, but I'm preferring here to use my fingers instead, purely to reduce the amount of frizz and also to try and preserve some of my curl pattern, of which there isn't much already. So I decided to use my fingers, but of course if you find it easier and if you've got a brush that you really like that's good on your curly or wavy hair, then do by all means use a brush. So just basically brush through all of your hair, the sides and the back and the underneath, because in a minute we are going to pull all of the hair over to the front of the head and do what's called a unicorn cut. But first, obviously, it needs to be free of knots and tangles. Okay, next you want to get some hairbands. You're going to need 3 hairbands in total, and then tip your head forward, and as you can see here, you want to brush all your hair over from the nape of the neck all the way over the top of the head, over the crown to the front of the head, to the forehead, where you're going to tie it in a ponytail, a kind of back to front ponytail. As you can see, it is a bit of a lengthy process, or at least it was for me. This is probably where an actual brush would come in handy rather than fingers, so you may want to use a brush for this to ensure that you're getting every single strand of hair tidily over the back of your head to the front. And of course, we don't really care about how neat it looks, but the reason why we're trying to get it neat is just to make sure that you've got all those strands of hair pulled tightly and firmly to the front, so that when you go to cut those lengths in the ponytail, you're actually cutting the true lengths and layers of the hair, and that nothing's trapped or kind of doubled over or kinked at the back. So yeah, so if you've got a good hairbrush or a comb or something that might make this process a little bit quicker and more efficient, then by all means use it. Otherwise, go ahead and use your fingers to comb through the hair and get it all nice and tight right there at the front and wrap it in your ponytail. So there you have it. I finally managed to get my ponytail as neat as I wanted it, and pulled it really, really tight, and then fastened the hairband around the front there. And I guess the reason why they call this a unicorn cut is because that thing at the front kind of looks like a unicorn. You certainly wouldn't want to wear it out as a hairstyle. I can't pull it off anyway, that's for sure, as much as I try. So once you've got that first band at your forehead nice and tight, put a second band a few inches further down the ponytail, And this again is just to pull the hair nice and straight. It's not entirely necessary, but it does help to get the hair nice and straight, nice and tight, so that when you come to trim the ends, which we're going to do in a second, you know that you're capturing all the hair that there is at that length in the ponytail. So there I am putting on the third band there as further down the ponytail, and in a second we're going to grab the scissors and you're going to cut just above that third hairband. So here goes. So make sure you've got that third hairband in the place where you actually want to cut. And I kind of based it on how much I cut off the length. So around the same sort of length that I cut off those long lengths at the very beginning is what I'm taking off here. Yeah. It is a little bit of a shock when you haven't cut your hair before, but don't worry, it's actually looks like a lot more than it actually is. When you let your hair down, you realise you've still got long hair, even though it feels like you've cut off quite a lot. Now, like me, you may find that when you've cut off that hairband that you feel that it's not exactly even. And all you have to do here is just straighten it out a little bit. This is a very forgiving method, thank God, and you can correct mistakes quite easily. So as you can see here, I'm just holding that the very, very ends of that ponytail between my fingers and just trimming off the very ends to try and get it straighter. And if you're still not happy, what I did was I fanned out the ponytail. So you can see here I'm fanning it out, and then I'm chopping up and into the ponytail as we did with the lengths. And again, just like with the lengths, this is helping to reduce the bulk, to give a much more natural finish instead of a blunt cut, and also to lighten and thin those ends. And it's really good, especially if you've got hair like mine, which is wavy and does have a curl pattern but can easily be weighed down by a loss of bulk. Then lightening and reducing bulk in the ends can really help your curls and your waves to bounce back up and to give you a really nice swishy, bouncy, layered style. So carry on snipping up into that ponytail. You can probably go for quite a while on this because, as you can see with my hair here, because of the way that we're cutting it in that unicorn ponytail there is a lot of it. There's a lot of sort of thick ends there, so they can really take a lot of that upward snipping action. So carry on snipping to your heart's content until you feel that you've got it to a point that you're happy with, and the next step will be that we let down the hair, and then we're going to do our front layers. So once you're happy with what you've done here, pull the hairbands out of the hair and let your hair down, give it a swoosh and a comb through with your fingers, and then you can start checking to make sure that you're happy. I really felt at this stage the difference that the cut has already made to my hair. Without those ends on the lengths and also with the layers having been trimmed, the hair already just felt in so much better condition, a lot lighter, and yeah, you just get that kind of salon feeling of having much better conditioned hair. This is also probably a good point to check the back, and doing it on camera is the perfect way to do that. So just have a swish about and make sure that you're happy with the back as well. Next, we're moving on to the front layers, or your fringe. So use your fingers or a hairdressing comb to section out your fringe area. I find it easy to kind of grab a triangle on each side of your centre parting, if that makes sense, and then pulling it forward, combing it through, and making it into one sort of uniform fringe. If you've actually got a fringe, then this will probably be a bit easier, but for me, they're just long front layers. So you kind of have to pull forward what would be a fringe, and it's basically those two sort of triangles above your eyebrows on either side of your centre parting. Comb through that whole section and make sure that nothing is kinked or caught up, and that you've got all of the full lengths of that fringe or those front layers. And then twist the hair from the eyebrows sort of area all the way down to the end. And then instead of cutting across, which you can do, I have cut into the hair on this section because it gives obviously a less blunt line. And also, if you're not actually cutting a fringe, if you've just got these sort of feathery layers around the front of the face, then this technique works pretty well. And of course, if you want to go shorter and shorter, you can just keep snipping more and more. So it's up to you. You can either do one cut across that section and have a blunt line and leave it like that, or go in and feather it, or just do the feathering as I'm doing here. I'm quite happy with the results having only feathered it, but next time I cut my hair I may well do the blunt line and the feathering just to get rid of a little bit more bulk there. So once you've done that, loosen it out, and then what I did was I tied what I had cut up in a ponytail to enable me to get the next layer down and trim that as well. So on some YouTube videos they simply do the front and only the front, but because I've got quite a lot of feathered layers around the face, I wanted to make sure that all of them had been trimmed, just in case any of them hadn't been caught up in the unicorn cut that we did earlier on in the process. So in order to separate it out, as you can see, I put a ponytail in the section that I had already cut and then took 2 more triangles from the sides of that, so a little bit further down the sides of my face. And then scoop up any little straggling bits that you want to include in that section. Just try and make sure that it's even on both sides and that you've got one whole kind of chunk of equally lengthed hair. And then do the same as you did with the first fringe section. So twist it round at the ends, and we're going to cut it in the same way that we did the fringe bit. As you can see, the fringe bit that you've already done might get in the way a bit. So at this point I took the hairband out of the first bit that I had already cut so that I could sweep that across to the side. So right now I'm putting a hairband in the section that I want to cut next to make sure it doesn't get caught up in the bit that's already been cut. And then I sweep the original fringe, there you go, behind the ear to get it out of the way. Now you may just want to sort of wrap that up into a little mini bun, or clip it to the side anyway to get it out of the way so that you can do that next section. And with this next section we cut it in exactly the same way as we did the very first bit of fringe, and that means dragging it all forward, pulling it all nice and tight and straight there, making sure that nothing's kinked or trapped, and then twisting the hair around, as you can see there, getting the scissors and cutting up into the hair. And basically we're going to do this, I think I did this 4 times over in the same way. So mostly snipping upwards into the hair, but as you saw there I did snip off horizontally a little piece that seemed to be a lot longer than the rest, and luckily it did look okay afterwards. So yeah, so as I was saying before, a lot of YouTube videos will just take the one section of the fringe, or bangs as Americans call them, but if like me you've got all of these feathered layers going all the way down the front around the face, and also if like me those layers do tend to get quite split and dry, because they're normally the parts of the hair that get brushed and sort of over processed the most, then you may want to trim all of your layers like me. So I pulled forward 4 sections of the hair, bit by bit. So okay, that piece is now done. I've let it out. I'm just checking to make sure that it's all straight, which it is. So I flick that bit back, and then you're going to go further down around the side of the jawline to get your next section. So first just checking those layers that I've already done to make sure that they're blending in, which they are, and that then nothing is sort of sticking out as too short or too bulky. If anything does still look a bit bulky at this stage, by the way, don't worry too much, because after we've done all of these front layers, I'm going to show you how I go through the sides and just reduce any bulk that you feel is still there. So next up, grab all of the hair that you've trimmed now, so those first two sections of your fringe, and tie it up into a top knot on the top of your head. And that means that it's out the way and you're not going to confuse the bits that you've already trimmed with your next sections. I then sort of combed through with my fingers the remaining hair, the remaining layers around the sides of my face, which, as you can see, actually have pretty much grown out. But I did the same thing again. So once again, we take that triangular section from each side of the face on both sides and pull them round to the front, just like we did with sections 1 and 2. Again, combing and pulling to make sure that there aren't any straggly bits left behind, and that everything is even and that you're getting all of the length in there, and making sure that you trim everything nice and evenly. So yeah, just spend a little bit of time combing that through and making sure that you've got it all secure. And then we're going to do exactly the same as we did with the other section. So you twist it around at the front, in front of your face, and then we'll just get the scissors and trim those ends as well. Definitely helps to keep the hair that you've already trimmed on the top of your head, because otherwise it would just be totally getting in the way, not to mention getting in your eyes and stopping you being able to see. So I definitely recommend doing that either with a hairband or with a clip. So there you can see I've twisted the hair round again, and I've got the ends that I want to trim. So again, I'm using the method where I trim up into the hair rather than across. But again, if you've been cutting across with your other front sections, then by all means go ahead and do that again here. So trimming up into the hair again, reducing that bulk, feathering it, lightening it up, and helping those front layers to be able to bounce back into a wave or a curl once you wash and style it after the haircut. You can tell that by this point in the haircut I was getting quite confident, and just snipping away happily without any worries at all. It's really the very first bit of the haircut that's more nerve-wracking, but by this stage, you know, you've checked over what you've done a few times and you're quite confident that that you're not wrecking your hair completely, and especially having already done two sections of the front fringe layers, and seeing that they were fine. This part was pretty easy. So I was snipping away before letting that section go, and then moving on to the last front section. So again, take out the hairband, loosen the hair, give it a quick brush through with a brush or with your fingers, and just check that you're happy with the way that those layers are sitting. And then find the section at the very bottom, just above your ears, to do your next front layers. And again, you've guessed it, same process as before. Pull them to the front, gather them together in front of the face, make sure they're nice and straight and smooth and pulled nice and tight, and then twist at the front once again, and then get snipping. I think probably like me, you will be quite snip happy by this stage. You can see on this one though, it is actually quite uneven. On the other layers, on the fringe and the other layers going around the side of my face, it was a lot more even across in terms of a horizontal line, but this one wasn't. So again, as you saw me do a bit earlier, if you have got any straggly bits that seem to be a lot longer than the rest, then just give them a snip, give them a horizontal snip to straighten them out. And you can see I use that fanning action that we used earlier as well. So again, if your hair's quite thick or you've got quite a lot of it and you're holding it in that sort of pinched way that I am there, you might find it quite hard to really feel that you're cutting evenly across the whole section of the hair. So do what I did and just fan it out if you need to, so that you can cut right up into the hair and get every single little bit. You're really going to notice once this part has been cut how much better your hair feels. When you run your fingers through the front of your hair there, they'll just glide through. Whereas before, if you've gone a few months without a haircut or a trim, you're definitely going to be feeling those pulls and snags when you try and run your fingers through, especially the front of your hair. But it's going to feel really nice in a minute when you do that, and you'll really feel the benefit. So pull the ponytail out, shake your hair out, and you've now done those front layers. We're now going to check the sides. So if you've got any bulky bits that you feel are still a little bit heavy on the side, and this really is going to come down to your own personal style and your hair type, and this stage isn't necessary at all. If you're happy, once we've got to this point in the haircut, that you've done everything that you want to do, then you're finished. But if you do, like me, find that you've got some side layers that are kind of just a little bit too heavy and they're not blending in that well with the rest of the hair, then what I did was I basically just took sections at the side and used that same feathering method to thin them out. So grabbed a section, twisted it round and started trimming up into the hair to reduce the bulk on the side of my head. I'm not quite sure if it's just a case of every time I go to the hairdresser, they kind of go over the same layers. So certain bulky bits kind of just get trimmed each time and never actually get reduced. Maybe I'm not quite sure, but or maybe it's just the way that the layers grew out during lockdown, not having had a trim for a while. Anyway, whatever the reason is, there was that little bit of bulk at the side. So there you can see how I've just kind of trimmed up into that bit a little bit and reduced it, and then I'm just checking again. So throughout every single section of this haircut, you want to be putting your hair back to how it should be, flicking it around, tossing it from left to right and checking that you're happy with how things are going. So there you can see I've picked out another piece that I'm not happy with, and I'm thinning that out as well, fanning out the hair and trimming up into the layer there in order to thin it out a little bit more and reduce that bulk on the left hand side of my head. So once you've finished doing all of these extra bits around the head, you are pretty much done. So make sure that you're happy. As I said, check your hair, toss it about a bit, shake it about a bit, and then check to make sure that everything's even. So I've seen the hairdressers do this. So they pull the hair down to the front of the face and just make sure that all those layers that you've cut there are all even on both sides. And you can kind of get a feel for that. It's almost more about what you can feel between your fingers and what you can actually see. But yeah, comb it through. As you can see, I was pretty happy by this stage. So there you have it, relatively painless. This is the final result, and I've got to say, I'm kind of pleased with it. You can really tell after you've washed, scrunched and gelled your hair what a difference this haircut actually makes. Putting all those layers in, and especially because the layers blend into the lengths, it really makes your hair easier to style in a curly or wavy style. And these are the before and after photos where you can really see the difference, not only in the curlability of the hair but also in the condition as well. So as you can see, the before photo, the hair looks quite frizzy and the ends look really straggly. It won't hold a curl at all there. And in the after one, obviously, much shinier, better condition without those dry ends. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know how you got on cutting your hair, and please comment below and of course subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.